everyone, and welcome to our stream today. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we have Lindsay Wilson here today, who is a social worker and our coordinator for interpersonal violence, and she is going to tell us or give us the spill the tea for us on domestic violence and what it means for veterans and what VA does to help veterans. So, Lindsay, do you want to welcome and thank you for joining me today? Do you want to talk a little bit about this graphic, and then we can move on?
Absolutely. So as it says, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. You see these two rings at the bottom. That's the symbol that we use here in the VA for our Intimate Partner Violence Assistance Program. It includes purple, which is the color that's typically associated with Domestic Violence Awareness Month, as well as white, which goes with our White Ribbon campaign to end intimate partner violence and sexual assault. It has sort of like the rope motif, kind of like that reminds us of some of the armed services. So if you see this symbol around at the VA, that is indicating the Intimate Partner Violence Assistance Program. And you can see at the bottom right, it also has the domestic violence hotline. That is a resource that's available to everyone and something that I definitely encourage people to use if you need it. It's 24/7, 1-800-799-SAFE or 7233. They also have a website where you can chat with people, which is thehotline.org. And there's a text line as well. So yeah. It's October's DV Awareness Month, and in addition to some other things. So just wanted to come on. I'll be here weekly just to talk to folks a little bit about what intimate partner violence is, what it might look like for veterans, and what we have to support our veterans, their partners, and VA staff who might be impacted by intimate partner violence.
So, Lindsay, let's define domestic violence and personal or interpartner violence, because we're using both terms. So let's define what it is.
Yes, absolutely. So we use the term intimate partner violence. A lot of people use them interchangeably. They do kind of mean the same thing. I'll just say for the VA, when we say intimate partner violence, we mean any kind of violent behavior. So that can be physical or sexual violence. It can be psychological aggression, which some people might say is like emotional or verbal abuse, as well as stalking. So lots of different kinds of behaviors fall under that umbrella. It's something done by a current or former intimate partner. So that might be a spouse, it might be someone you dated, it might be some other kind of, partner relationship that you had. It can occur, you don't have to live with the person, you don't have to be sexually intimate with them. I think sometimes people hear intimate and that's what they think. It can happen to anyone. So it can be in a heterosexual relationship, same-sex relationships, regardless, men, women, whatever your gender. And it has sort of a range, right? So it can be, sometimes people experience frequent and severe kinds of intimate partner violence. Sometimes it may be more spread out, episodic. So all of that really falls under intimate partner violence. What domestic violence means, and I would think of them kind of as like a Venn diagram. They overlap a lot, but they're a little bit different. Domestic violence, so if you think of domestic, you think of home. So domestic violence refers to any violence that's happening within like the domestic sphere, so in the home. So that can include intimate partner violence, but it can also include things like child abuse or elder abuse. So I think a lot of times it's the shorthand that people use, and I think, people understand what we mean, but just they're like a little bit different with a lot of overlap. So you'll hear me using, our program's called the Intimate Partner Violence Assistance Program, but the month is called Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So I know it can be a little confusing, but they're two terms that are a little bit different, but with a lot of overlap.
Yeah, I would think that domestic violence also covers, like all kinds of familial relationships. It could be cousins, siblings, because it doesn't have to be limited to romantic partners. It could just be people who are all roommates, people who are just living in the same house, where one tries to exert control over the other.
Exactly. And we also know that you can experience violence from someone you're dating and not live with them, right? You
Mhm.
might be dating someone you live separately, but they're still being violent, stalking, whatever it is. So that's sort of why we have like the two different terms, just to distinguish those a little bit. But that's exactly right.
Well, in your definition, you mentioned that there's a continuum. Like some people, it's sort of so mild that it may be sort of unrecognizable, like
Hmm.
maybe the emotional part or the verbal part. In fact, there was a whole movie made about gaslighting where someone is gaslighting his partner, which is basically trying to make that partner feel that what their eyes see and what they experience is not true. So, can you talk about what are the signs, or like how does someone know if they are in an IPV situation? Because it could be pretty subtle.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different like red flags that you can look for. And I think that's exactly right, that sometimes things can be subtle. And unfortunately, we know that sometimes when things start with just sort of like emotional and verbal violence, it can escalate into physical violence. And so it is important to be able to recognize some of these signs. I think sometimes like manipulative behavior, dishonesty, those kinds of things can be red flags to look out for. Um, Sometimes people can present as very charming, and that can also make it a little bit hard for people who are experiencing violence, because everyone else is like, no, like what a nice person. But maybe like at home, things look a little bit different. There's sometimes irritability, kind of mood swings, I guess is maybe a term we can use. A lot of folks that I work with, they're like, I don't necessarily know what I'm going to get when I walk through the door. I don't know who's coming home from work, which kind of version of my partner I'm going to get. And then they end up kind of walking on eggshells. That's a concept that I hear a lot from people that I work with, because you just like don't necessarily know what you can say that might set someone off. So I think those are things to be aware of. I think generally kind of aggressiveness, threats, things like that. Sometimes people might see a difference in behavior from a partner when they drink or use other substances. Sometimes people will say like they're a totally different person when they drink, and these are things to be aware of. Displaying a lack of remorse generally, and sometimes it can be small things, right? Especially when you have a partner, people are getting to know each other, right? Maybe they say something that upsets you, and we don't all know what's going to upset other people, but if they don't display any remorse when they've upset you or hurt you in some way, that might be something to kind of be aware of and be concerned about. So blaming you for their behavior, that can be a common thing. Sometimes excessive jealousy, or any kind of controlling behavior, wanting to like control finances, isolating a person from other people in their life.
What
That
does
can
that
be.
look like when someone because we talk about isolating, but what
Mhm.
exactly does that look like?
Sure.
When
And I
someone,
think, yeah, it can take some different forms. I think people approach it differently. But, if you have a partner that's trying to keep you from talking to your friends or family, maybe they say, they're not good people, like you shouldn't be talking to them, or like they hate me, we can't go around them, you don't need to talk to them. Or they kind of monitor your like phone or social media use. So I think there are different ways that tactics that people use to approach it, but the ultimate goal is to kind of cut you off from your other supports, whoever that may be, um, just so you have kind of only them to depend on, and that allows for more control in that situation.
so how did the VA get to the point where it is having a IPV program for veterans? Like, um, and what does VA offer to veterans on both sides? whether someone uses violence or is the victim or the receiver of violence. So talk about what VA has recognized, and what it's offering veterans.
Sure. So it kind of has roots about a decade ago. We celebrated our 10th anniversary of the IPV program kind of officially existing earlier this year. Essentially, there was a call from, at the time, President Obama for all agencies of the executive branch to establish task forces and look at domestic violence and intimate partner violence as a problem, because it's a big issue. It has a lot of, obviously, health impacts, but also a lot of economic impacts too, in terms of people not being able to work, like lost productivity, et cetera, healthcare costs. And so the VA had a task force that put forth a lot of recommendations, and one of them was to have a program like this. And so that evolved into what we now have is the Intimate Partner Violence Assistance Program, that thankfully has grown. We here in Baltimore, we're actually one of the initial pilot sites. So we were sort of on the cutting edge of it and got kind of ahead of the game. But now we have the Intimate Partner Violence Program implemented at every VA across the country. Which is really great because it's a resource not just for veterans, but we're also a resource for veteran partners and for VA staff who might be impacted by intimate partner violence.
So how does VA approach, are there any specific programs for those people who may be using violence, especially since they are veterans and may have had trauma from combat or military experience?
Yes.
Is the rate higher among veterans? Can you talk about that a little?
It is. So research kind of consistently shows that veterans are at higher risk of being impacted by intimate partner violence, kind of both ways, than their civilian counterparts. And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? It's not that there's anything inherently wrong with veterans or the veterans are more violent, right? There are a lot of things that sort of intervene in that. So trauma is one, like you said, PTSD, combat. We know that military family life can be difficult, right? People are moving, there might be away from their support systems. People deploy, so their families are separated for a time and then have to kind of reintegrate. That can be a source of conflict. Things like traumatic brain injury, other mental health conditions, maybe substance use can play a role. So there are a lot of factors that might be more common in the veteran population that we know also may increase the risk for intimate partner violence. So that's part of the reason why it is important that the VA offers this, because we're working with a population that might be more likely to experience some of these things, unfortunately. And to what you said, we have a lot of specific interventions that were developed for veterans to address some of these things. So Strength at Home is a program that we offer for veterans who are using violence or might be at risk of using violence, might find themselves being aggressive in their relationships. It's a 12-week therapy group that sort of at its base sort of recognizes the impact that trauma has in relationships, how trauma can impact kind of how we communicate with people, how we might kind of see things as a threat, or, we might be kind of looking out for the bad stuff coming our way. And you can see, right, if you have an argument with your partner and you're kind of always looking out for the bad thing to come, then that can escalate that conflict, right? We're not in a place of giving the benefit of the doubt sort of thing. So Strength at Home, we talk about how trauma can show up in relationships. We talk about what are strategies to manage conflict as it comes up, how to manage anger, because anger in and of itself is fine, right? Anger is a thing that we all have. It's one of our basic emotions. It exists for a reason, but it's really about how we express it. So we talk about that. We talk about how to manage stress. We talk about, being in that survival mode and always kind of looking for threats and how that can impact us. And then we talk a lot about communication strategies, because that is an area that people tend to struggle a lot in relationships, right? I think when you hear people have relationship problems, they usually say it's our communication.
So can you give an example of a communication strategy? Because people mostly think, well, we talk to each other every day. So what do you mean by communication strategy?
So, yeah, absolutely. And I think we do talk to each other every day. Are we talking in a way that is like productive? So one session's all about listening, active listening. Active listening, some skills we do are paraphrasing. So, you know, just sort of reflecting back what you heard someone say, just to make sure that you understand. So what I think I heard you say is this, is that right? And that's just a good way to check and make sure that you're understanding what your partner says. We talk about using clarifying questions. So, when you're not sure what they're saying, just asking questions about it, and asking questions in a curious way, not in a like, we always talk about, yeah, like you're not a prosecutor on Law and Order. You're trying to understand what they're saying. And then validating, which is, I think, a harder skill, but it's really just saying, okay, I can see where you're coming from. I might not agree, but I can understand why you feel that way. And that, because unfortunately, I think people say this a lot, we listen to respond and not to understand. Mm-hmm. And so some of those skills are really to listen to understand, because if you can hear what your partner is really saying, understand it, then it's easier for you to formulate a response. And it's also, they're more apt to listen to you, right? If they feel like they're heard. So that's one session we do in the communication section. We do another one on assertive messages. So that sort of, we don't want to be aggressive, but we also don't want to be passive and not say
what is
anything.
An assertive message?
So yeah, it's kind of that middle ground where you're able to get your point across, right? You want to be able to express your feelings, but respectfully. So usually, like when we formulate an assertive message and we talk about it in the group, there's 3 parts to it. There's your feeling. So you usually start with like, I feel blank. So let's say I feel frustrated. You want to name the situation. So like, I feel frustrated when you leave your shoes on the floor. And then a request or the change that you're looking for. So can you please put them in the closet? So you're able to say what you want, say how you feel in a non like aggressive way. Because we also don't want to be passive, right? We don't want to like keep all this stuff in. So an assertive message is sort of the middle point of like, you can still get your point across, but you can do it in a way that's respectful and that, leave some room for the other person to participate too. Because sometimes when we're aggressive, like, if you're yelling at someone, they don't really have a chance to respond, and we're not really able to problem solve.
So this is for people who actually might be using violence. Is it also for people who are the receivers of the violence? Like, how does one, like, you can't control anybody else's behavior, but if you're in a situation where you are at the receiving end of either, words, emotional or verbal abuse, like, do we teach veterans to advocate for themselves or to walk away, like whatever the solution might be?
So yeah, we actually have a newer intervention that we've just brought here earlier this year for people who are experiencing violence. It's called RISE. It's an acronym like everything here. It stands for Recovering from IPV through Strength and Empowerment. So that's why we use RISE. It's too long to say. But that counseling is for people who have currently or recently experienced violence. Of whatever type, verbal, physical, emotional. And the idea is empowerment, because when you're experiencing those things, it feels very disempowering, right? Someone else has a lot of control potentially. They might be really insulting you. You don't feel like you have a lot of self-esteem, or, like, even if you want to leave, it doesn't feel possible because you don't necessarily have that empowerment and confidence, self-efficacy within yourself to make those decisions. So the goal of RISE is to help develop those things. And it's really, what's cool about it is it's very like patient driven. So it's something we can do a few sessions or longer. There's basically 7 different like topics or modules that each session, the veteran gets to pick what we talk about. So it might be safety planning. That might be what they need to work on. There's one about how intimate partner violence impacts your health. That might be something that they need to work on. And we also talk about assertive communication there so that they can practice being more assertive. There's one about self-care and relaxation, making social connections, especially when you've dealt with that isolation, making difficult decisions, sometimes like making that decision to like stay or go. There's one just about resources and how to move forward, and also about sexual violence over the lifespan, because we also know, unfortunately, a lot of people who experience IPV have experienced MST, or within their IPV relationship, they might have also experienced sexual violence too.
Are there any experiences or traumas or events that set people up to be either a user or receiver of violence within within a domestic?
Not particular. I think there are things that can make people more prone. Unfortunately, sometimes when people do experience violence kind of in their life, some kind of violence or abuse, they might be more likely to experience it again. And sometimes people who maybe have grown up in a situation where there was intimate partner violence within their family might be more likely to kind of go either way, to use violence or experience violence. A lot of people who've experienced different kinds of traumas, maybe within the military, military sexual trauma, other sexual assault trauma, things like that, that can show up. And sometimes it is just a matter of people kind of having symptoms and not really knowing what to do with them. So a lot of times people who kind of get referred to us, it is something that they maybe need to work out in trauma therapy. Or I've had veterans who do strength at home. And once we kind of start talking a little bit, because we do talk about like your family of origin, especially about communication, like how did your family communicate and how is that contributing to how you communicate? Sometimes once people get to talking about that, they realize they have a lot more to talk about. And then, we end up referring people to trauma therapy to sort of get a little bit deeper and work out maybe some of these more underlying issues that they're seeing come up in their relationships.
So I've noticed in the restrooms, at least the ladies' rooms, that there's the sign. Can you talk about that a little bit, like what that sign is and what people can do to maybe save themselves in a situation where they feel unsafe?
Yes. So you'll see in the restrooms at the VA, there are posters that have like a hand signal. It's the universal sign for help. It came from the Canadian Women's something. It's just a way to sort of subtly ask for help, because we know, like here at the VA, we want to assist if, and it's not just for intimate partner violence, if it's human trafficking, sexual assault, like kind of whatever safety issue that comes up. It's something that we want to help with. So it's just a way to kind of quietly, subtly ask for help from staff, just to get you connected. And you'll also see on those posters, there are a lot of phone numbers and resources too, and like QR codes you can scan. Has the domestic violence hotline, there's the human trafficking hotline, the national sexual assault hotline, and I believe the crisis line as well. So it's really just a way, if you don't feel comfortable talking to your provider, because you absolutely can do that, we're asking questions in appointments to try to start these conversations. But if you don't feel comfortable in that way, or, maybe sometimes people are here with a partner that is a violent partner and they need to ask for help in a subtle way. This hand signal is just a way to do that, kind of quietly, discreetly, to let somebody know that you need help. And then we can kind of talk to you further to see what's going on and see what we can do to help.
And our staff is trained to recognize that
yes.
signal. So, and talk about screening. When does it happen at the VA? How, are men also screened? So talk about the screening process and then what happens afterwards.
So yes, we typically, people are screened at primary care appointments. I'm sure anyone that comes to the VA for primary care, you're used to being asked a million questions by the nurse who checks you in. And hopefully some of them should be about relationship health and safety. Certainly it's up to you if you want to answer those questions, but they are ones that are important. And we do screen everyone. Certainly, we especially want to make sure women of childbearing age, which the VA defines as women under 48, are tend to be most vulnerable. So we definitely want to get those people, but we typically do screen everyone. So you get a few questions just about things that have happened in your relationship in the past year. If you've been screaming and cursing, insults, and talking down to, threats, if there's been physical violence, sexual violence. And then if you say yes to any of those things, they ask some further questions just to get a sense of the risk. Have things been getting worse in the past 6 months? Has your partner ever choked or strangled you? Because that's a really dangerous act. And then, do you believe your partner may kill you? So we want to get a sense of what might be the level of severity so we know how best to respond. But it's really, and I want to emphasize too that it's something that we are trying to just ask everyone. So it's not, if you do get asked these questions, it's not like no one got a vibe off of you to say that something's wrong. It's really something that we're trying to ask everyone because we know that your relationship can impact your health, right? Even if you're just experiencing verbal and emotional abuse, that on an ongoing basis, like that can create a level of stress that impacts you physically, right? I see people that they have headaches, they have stomach problems, right? Anything, if you can think of anything that you experience when you just have ongoing stress, that's a risk when you're experiencing intimate partner violence of any kind, especially on like a chronic ongoing basis. So we want to look at that as a part of your health, right? You're a whole person. And that's what we want to look at. So we're really trying to screen everybody. Again, it's something that you have some control over. You don't have to answer the questions if you don't want to or you're not comfortable. We can also make sure the information's not documented. If you don't feel comfortable with that, we have an easy button to click and it kind of hides it in your note. Just so that we can see what's there so we can reach out to help. And you get to decide too what you want to do. Even if you say you're experiencing things, if you don't want to talk to myself or my colleague, that's up to you. But we want to make sure that you're aware of us as a resource and that we can assist if you need us. And the last thing I want to say about that too is even if you're experiencing violence, our job is not to like make you do anything, including leave. So our job is to meet you where you are and offer whatever support we can to help you be as safe as possible wherever you are.
So I want to talk about the stereotypes a little bit. A lot of people think that women are the receivers and men are the perpetrators. So talk about how that is not often always true. Yeah. That talk about that dynamic.
Yeah, I think that that's pretty much the stereotype, right? I think if you talk about intimate partner violence or domestic violence, people get a mental image, and if it's of a woman with like a black eye from her male partner. And certainly that is part of it. Women do experience intimate partner violence at high rates, but men also can too. We have several clients. I talked to a male veteran that was referred to me earlier today. And I think we have a pretty good, if I look at our referrals, it's pretty evenly divided, I would say, in terms of referrals that we get. So definitely men can experience violence. I think sometimes there's obviously these stereotypes that like men are bigger and stronger, so you shouldn't be experiencing any violence from women, but it's just not the case. And even if someone isn't bigger and stronger than you, they still shouldn't be physically violent toward you. And I think, as we talked about, that verbal and emotional violence, those threats, those demeaning, belittling, talking down, insulting, like those things still impact you. And, even if like this idea, the stereotype that men are supposed to be tough and, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. We know that that's not the case. So it's definitely something that men can experience, and it's something that men don't have to experience. And unfortunately, I think society-wise, maybe we haven't fully caught up in this area, right? I think sometimes like the legal system isn't super helpful when men are experiencing violence because, they're still kind of steeped in some of these stereotypes. But it definitely is not just something that women experience at the hands of men. It definitely can go both ways. We also know that like within same-sex relationships, it can be a problem. That's also sometimes hard to get help with because people are like, oh, well, it's like two women fighting, two men fighting, like, it's fair. But it's still like not okay, kind of whoever it happens to. So it definitely is something that, even though that's the stereotype, and even though it may be more common for like women to experience violence, it's definitely something that happens to men. It's definitely something that can have a real impact. And it's definitely something that we want to be here to support you with too.
And the other thing I wanted to talk about, aside from it happening with LGBTQ, is the purpose of people who use violence. It's sort of about power and control.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk about the cycle that it sort of goes through?
Yes. So, and this is a reason I think why a lot of people sort of stay in a relationship, because it's not always like at its worst, right? There's often like incidents of abuse. And then there's usually like an apology, some sort of amends that the person might make. So maybe a partner hits their partner, right? They get aggressive, they escalate, they hit their partner, and then things cool down. Oh, I'm so sorry. Flowers, gifts, whatever. And then, we get back into a sort of normal state, right? Things are okay. And then there is something that sets this person off, and it doesn't have to be, something big. I think people have their things, especially when they're being physically abusive. Sometimes people, like, it's a sort of hairpin trigger kind of thing. And then we have that tension building and we get back to an incident of violence. So yeah, it's usually like tension builds, there's violence, there's a reconciliation, and then there's calm. And often we can get in that cycle. And I think once people get to calm, maybe they forget a little bit about the incident of violence, right? It's like, okay, well, it's fine now. But often we know that the cycle comes back around. So that's something that can kind of keep people stuck. And sometimes that becomes like a manipulation tactic, right? Like, it's like, well, we move past that, so why can't you get over that?
Yeah. So essentially, this is a safe place for veterans who are either experienced or using violence within their home to receive help in however way they need it.
Yes.
Without judgment.
Absolutely. Yes. That is exactly our goal. Like I said, we have these kind of therapy interventions, but we also will kind of talk to people. We can do safety planning, again, kind of on both sides. So like talking about, what do these incidents look like? What can you do to prepare for them to keep yourself safe? And you can safety plan if you're staying in a relationship. You can safety plan for leaving. You can safety plan you've already left and stuff's still happening, right? You can safety plan if you're the person who is aggressive, right? If I feel myself feeling this like rising anger, what can I do to keep myself from being violent? We could do safety planning. We connect people to all sorts of resources within the VA and within the community, whether that's housing, legal, other counseling, financial support, lots of different resources, just to make sure that people kind of can address whatever they need, because we know that those things all play a role, right? Sometimes people stay in a relationship because they need the housing or because their partner's in control of the finances and they don't have any money. So we want to try to address like all sides of a situation, just so people can, live their lives safely in whatever way they want that to be.
I was going to ask you about the money part, because the money part is a great inhibitor. It's a form of control if somebody's controlling it. But also money means a lot more. When I was a reporter and covering domestic violence as a journalist, I interviewed many, many super wealthy women who stayed because their children were in the right schools. So talk about how money factors in and how money itself can be a form of abuse within, financial abuse within a relationship.
Yeah, money is definitely can be a lever for control, I think, right? If one partner is bringing in most of the money, and they don't let their other partner have access to it, then if you think about it, what can you do, right? You can't go anywhere. You can't put gas in your car. You can't check into a hotel. You can't like get on a plane to fly somewhere else. It really keeps you stuck if you don't have access to any funds. And that's really a way that people can keep somebody in check. And like you said, that also inhibits getting other housing and getting other housing in a place you want to stay in. I've had multiple recently veterans who are moms whose kids are in high school and they don't want to disrupt their kids' education, but they're like, I don't know if I can afford a place by myself in this same area. So what am I going to do? Because I don't, I want to leave, but I also don't want to uproot my kid. So it's, I think, first of all, that speaks to how much more complex it is than I think people understand, because people just leave is sort of the message sometimes that people get, but it's a lot more complicated than we think. But yeah, money can be a big barrier. It's a way for people to control. It's something that you need to sort of make changes. So it can be really hard, but it's something that we try to connect people with resources to help afford new housing. Sometimes it's just like applying for benefits, things like that, to just try to get in a better spot, connecting people to partners so they can get jobs and attain some financial independence. And yeah, sometimes people have even if they're bringing in money, their partner wants everything in one account that they have control over. And they're over your shoulder kind of looking at things. And sometimes you might have an abusive partner that mismanages money and puts you in a hole. So there's it can be a real barrier and a real lever for abuse, unfortunately. Yeah.
So let's talk about something that people hardly ever talk about, especially when it comes to VA, the success rates that we have in working with couples who, with interventions, can actually maybe go on to live a very happy life together, because they love each other. They just love each other without the violence. So talk about our success rate.
Yeah, so we have another intervention called Strength at Home Couples. So it has a lot of the same material as the Strength at Home for veterans who are violent, and it is intended for couples where there is sort of back and forth conflict. So usually a lot of verbal, maybe emotional abuse coming back and forth, and it offers these tools for communication, because I think, like I said, a lot of it is people have these difficulties and they just don't know how to communicate in an effective way to get through them. So it's definitely something we've been offering, and we've gotten good feedback from the couples who have done it, that they've found it helpful to have these skills of just how to again, how to communicate what you want in a way that's respectful but still gets your point across, how to help your partner feel heard, how to talk about your feelings, how to avoid some of the common traps, right? Like always and never are not great words we want to use. Or when it's like, I've saved up all the stuff I was mad about and I'm telling you all of it right now. This fight's now not this fight, it's the last 10 fights we've had. So we talk about things like that. And yeah, I think we've gotten really good feedback from people who have done it, from people who have done all of them. But yeah, I think that just having some tools to be able to communicate better, because I think that a lot of times when we have a couple that's really high conflict, obviously everyone brings kind of their own stuff to a relationship, but they just don't really know how to communicate about their feelings in an effective way.
So how do veterans, aside from the screening process, let's say, can a veteran self-refer to, and how do they do that?
Yes. So people get referred to us through screening and through other clinicians. So, we get referrals from people if they've talked about relationship issues in therapy, their therapist can refer to us. Definitely lots of different ways. People can also contact us directly.
What is
and
that number? How can they contact you directly?
So yes, I cover the Baltimore area. So I cover like Baltimore, Loch Raven, Eastern Baltimore County, Glen Burnie, Fort Meade, people who live in Carroll and Howard as well. My number, and we can, put them on the Facebook too.
I'm gonna put that. I'm gonna type it into the comment section right now.
Okay, great. So my number, it's 410-591-3004. And my colleague, Caitlin, she covers the Perry
Caitlin
Point.
is C-A-I or?
It's Kaitlin. She covers Perry Point, that area, as well as the Eastern Shore. And her number is 443-525-0979.
All right. So Lindsay in the Baltimore metro area.
Yes. And Caitlin, Perry Point and Eastern Shore.
And Caitlin is Perry Point and Eastern Shore. Yeah. So what do you really want veterans to know about your program, and about what you could do to help them, or if they are at home suffering, what can they do?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I think just knowing that we're here, like that we exist, because it's not, not everybody has this resource within their medical system. We are really here to kind of, like I said, meet you where you are. You may be in a situation that you're not happy with, but you're not ready to leave. So we can talk about what you can do to help make that a healthier situation, whatever that looks like for you. So I think that I would love for people to know that we're not here to judge you or to tell you what to do. We're really here to kind of look at your situation, talk through it with you, maybe offer some suggestions, but ultimately connect you with whatever we can to support you through what you're going through. And I think you also don't have to wait for things to feel really bad to reach out for help too, right? Even if you're starting to see red flags, you're starting to feel uncomfortable in your relationship, maybe, you feel like you're being insulted or belittled, and, you're not being hit or anything. You don't have to wait for things like that to happen, right? You don't have to wait for things to get worse. We're here. Or on the other side, if you're starting to feel yourself be really aggressive towards your partner, maybe you haven't been physically violent, but you're kind of feeling those feelings bubbling up, you can still participate in Strength at Home. The skills are useful. I think the skills in Strength at Home, honestly, are useful for literally anyone. But yeah, we're here when you need us. You don't have to wait for something to happen or for things to get worse or whatever it may be. We're really here to meet you at the point where you are and help move forward from there.
Well, thank you so much, Lindsay. I know we're going to be here next Tuesday. Can you give us a glimpse of what you're going to talk about next Tuesday so that people can tune in?
Yes. So next Tuesday, I'm going to delve a little bit more into Strength at Home and kind of where that came from and some of the things that we work on, just so people can learn a little bit more about that.
I think people will be very interested, especially people who feel themselves wanting to be a little bit more aggressive than they want to be. So I think that will be very useful. So join us next Tuesday for a deeper dive into Strength at Home. And thank you, Lindsay, for today and spilling the tea about domestic violence and IPV assistance. All right.
Thank you.
Ciao. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for listening.